I still remember the sound. Not his voice, not his face. The sound that told me my childhood was about to end. 3 slow knocks on our front door. Back then, I was just a kid, bare feet on a cold floor. Saturday morning quiet. The kind of quiet where you suddenly notice your own breathing and try to make it quieter. I didn't know it then, but that sound would follow me for the rest of my life. When those knocks came, my heart didn't jump with excitement. It sank, because in those days, a knock didn't mean company. It meant news, and news wasn't usually good. See, when your dad's fighting a war on the other side of the world, the mailman becomes the most important man in your life. Every afternoon, I'd wait for him, standing too close to the mailbox, hands clenched, whispering deals to God like they actually worked. Please, just today. For a while, there were letters, thin paper, familiar handwriting I almost remembered. He always said the same things, that he was fine, that he was proud of me, that he'd be home soon. Soon felt like forever. Then one day, the letters stopped, and that's when the house changed. That's when we stopped living and started listening. Every sound felt louder after that. Every silence felt heavier. The TV stayed on longer. Adults talked softer. I started catching words I wasn't supposed to hear. Missing, casualties, body count. I didn't know what those words meant. I just knew they were never followed by good news. Nobody explained anything to me. They just told me to behave, to pray, to help my mom. Like being good might somehow fix what was happening. So I waited. Every knock after that made my chest tighten. Every ringing phone made the whole house hold its breath. And then, that knock came. 3 slow ones. Not rushed, not loud, almost careful. My mother stopped moving, just froze. Hand pressed into the counter, like she needed something solid to stay upright. I watched her swallow, watched her breathe in, then hesitate. I remember thinking, this is it. I didn't know what it was. I just knew whatever was on the other side of that door was about to change everything. She opened it, and for half a second, I didn't see my father. I braced myself for a uniform, or a stranger, or nothing at all. And then I saw him, standing there on our porch. My father, but not the one I remembered. He looked thinner, older, like something inside him had been worn down and never rebuilt. He didn't smile right away, didn't bend down, didn't reach for me. He just stood there, like a man who knew the address, but wasn't sure he belonged anymore. This wasn't the dad who left laughing, lifting me onto his shoulders. This was someone quieter, smaller, and my heart twisted in a way I didn't have words for yet. Everyone talks about soldiers coming home like it's a happy ending. Like once the war's over, the story's done. But nobody tells you about that first moment. That long pause between relief and fear. That second when you realize the man who left and the man who came back might not be the same person. I wanted to run to him. Instead, I froze. Because even as a kid, I felt it. The war hadn't ended. It had just crossed the ocean, and it was standing right there on our front porch. For a while, everybody acted like we'd won something. Neighbors smiled too hard. Folks kept saying things like, "You must be proud," or "Bet you're glad it's finally over." Grown men shook his hand like he'd just crossed a finish line. I nodded along like I got it. But even then, something felt off. And I didn't know it yet, but that feeling wasn't just about him. It was about what was starting to happen to me. Because when the door closed behind him, the house didn't feel fuller. It felt smaller. My father didn't talk much after that. Not like before. Conversations stayed short, careful. He'd answer questions with a shrug or a quiet, "Yeah, I'm all right." I learned that quick, and that lesson didn't stay in childhood. All right didn't mean all right. It meant don't push. He didn't laugh the same. Didn't stretch out on the couch. Didn't wander around the house like he used to. He stayed near walls, near doorways, like part of him was always checking the room. I remember watching him from the hallway, feeling that tight pull in my chest, wondering if I should say something, anything, but I didn't, because I could feel it. The air around him was wound tight, like one wrong word could make everything crack. So I learned how to move differently. I learned how to walk softer, how to close doors slower, how to keep my voice down even when I was happy. Nobody called it trauma back then. I just knew I was learning how to survive without being taught. I thought I was helping. I didn't realize what I was giving up. I got real good at reading faces, real good at knowing when to disappear. I became the kind of kid who didn't need much, didn't ask for much. That habit followed me longer than his silence ever did. That's the part people don't talk about. And it doesn't stop there. When a soldier comes home, the whole family starts fighting a quieter war. At night, he barely slept. I'd hear him pacing, stopping, starting again. Sometimes he'd sit at the kitchen table for hours, jaw tight, eyes locked on nothing, like his mind had slipped somewhere else. I wanted to ask him where he went. I never did. Because sometimes when he looked at me, there were flashes, just quick ones, where his eyes didn't look like they were seeing me. And that scared me more than his silence. I didn't know how loud the world still was for him. I found out one summer night. Fireworks used to mean hot dogs and laughing, and neighbors yelling across lawns. Then the first boom went off, and his whole body locked up. Shoulders stiff, jaw clenched, eyes gone somewhere far away. Like he was bracing for something the rest of us couldn't hear. People laughed it off, said things like, "He'll be fine," or "Just give him time." Time didn't fix it. It just taught us how to adjust. I didn't hate him. I wasn't angry. I was trying to understand something I didn't have words for yet. Because even though my father was home, there was a space in our house that kept growing. And without realizing it, I was learning how to live inside it. Nobody ever sat me down and explained what was happening. They didn't have words for it back then. Not the kind we use now. So instead of explanations, we got rules. Don't slam doors. Don't sneak up on him. Don't ask too many questions. And most of all, don't bring up the war. I didn't know it at the time, but those rules were shaping me. I started measuring my days by his moods, by the way he walked into a room, by the look on his face when he set his keys down. Some days were calm. Some days felt tight before anyone even spoke. That's when I realized something that stuck with me. The war might have been over for the country, but it was still running our house. My father tried to be normal. He really did. He went to work, paid the bills, fixed things around the house. From the outside, we probably looked like any other family on the block. But inside, nothing felt settled. He drank more than he used to, not falling down drunk, just enough to quiet something inside him. A couple beers turned into a routine. A routine turned into a habit nobody talked about. We all pretended not to notice, because pretending felt safer than asking. Some nights, I'd wake up to his voice, not yelling, worse than that, low, strained, like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. I'd lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding, wondering if I should get up or stay put. I usually stayed put. I learned early that silence could be protective. That's another thing nobody tells you. The house learned his triggers before we learned his stories. Loud noises, sudden movements, crowded places. He flinched before he thought. His body reacted faster than his mind. I remember once dropping a pan in the kitchen. Just slipped out of my hands. The sound echoed. He was across the room in a second, eyes wide, breathing hard, like he'd been pulled back into something without warning. He saw my face, scared, frozen, and he stopped. That look on his face, I'll never forget it. Not anger, not rage, shame. He mumbled something, turned away, went outside. And that's when I learned something important. He wasn't fighting us. He was fighting memories. But knowing that didn't make it easier. Because every time it happened, something in me braced. I started expecting the tension, waiting for it, carrying it around like a backpack I never took off. That weight didn't stay in the house. It followed me to school, to friendships, to places where other kids laughed loud and careless. I watched more than I talked, thought before I spoke, learned how not to be a problem. People called me mature for my age. They didn't know I was just tired. I didn't connect the dots back then. I just knew something was off, that our house had rules nobody else seemed to live by. And here's the part that took me years to understand. The war didn't just change my father. It taught me how to disappear in plain sight. And I carried that lesson with me, long after the uniforms were put away. Some questions don't just feel uncomfortable. They're costly. To you and to everyone around you. I had a lot of those questions. I thought I'd get my chance to ask someday. That one day he'd sit down, crack a half smile, and finally tell me what happened over there. I imagined the stories pouring out, like all the missing pieces of our life would finally click into place. But that day never came. And even then, I didn't realize what that silence was doing to me, to us, shaping the way we'd move through the rest of our lives. Because the longer the words stayed unspoken, the wider the space grew. It crept between us in small ways. Tiny pauses, little misunderstandings, nights where I swallowed something I wanted to say, moments I almost asked only to stop. Like the night I held my tongue in the kitchen, just inches from asking the question I'd waited years to say, but didn't. Moments I wished I could rewind, knowing I wouldn't get a second chance. Years went by. I grew up, hit my teens, then adulthood. Life kept moving, like time didn't care. And yet, that silence didn't just sit there. It shaped the way I spoke, the way I listened, the way I measured every word. Safe topics only. Weather, work, bills, sports. The kind of talk that didn't poke at the wound. Because poking, that felt dangerous. Here's what nobody warns you about. The longer you wait to ask the hard questions, the heavier they get. And the stranger part, they don't just weigh on you. They weigh on the relationship too. I'd catch him staring off sometimes, eyes somewhere far away, and I'd think, now, this is the moment. Ask now. But I didn't, because I was scared. Scared of what he might say. Scared of what he might not say. Scared that once I heard it, I'd never see him the same way again. Or worse, scared that hearing nothing would finally make the distance impossible to bridge. And that fear, it didn't just protect me. It shaped everything between us. I stayed quiet. We stayed distant, unasked, waiting, growing heavier. Time was running, and the questions weren't getting any younger. And the cost of waiting only grew. By the time I was old enough to understand a little more about life, I realized something I hadn't been ready to see before. The war didn't leave with him. It stayed. It lingered in the house, in the quiet corners, in the meals we didn't eat together, in the questions I never asked. I learned that some gaps aren't filled by time. They only grow wider, and some silences, they echo long after the people you love try to move past them. There were moments, rare, fleeting, when he'd let a crack in that silence show. A laugh, a story half told, a glance that almost felt like recognition. My chest would tighten, and I'd think, here it is. This is the moment we connect. But just as quickly, it would vanish, and I'd be left with the weight of what remained unsaid. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at a photograph, or leaning on the porch railing, lost in thought. And I'd wonder if he remembered the boy who waited for him, who carried questions too heavy to ask. I wanted to step forward, ask one question, just one. But I hesitated, feeling the air between us thicken with every second I didn't speak. And that hesitation, it built its own weight. I carried that weight for years, into adulthood, into my own family, into conversations where I chose my words carefully because I knew how much silence could cost. Sometimes I wonder how different things might have been if I'd asked one of those questions. One, even just one. Maybe he would have told me, maybe not, but at least we would have known. And maybe things wouldn't feel so incomplete. Here's what nobody warns you about. Waiting doesn't erase the past. It only teaches you how to live with it. And the hardest part? Sometimes, living with it means you notice it everywhere. In the quiet of a car ride, in the pause before someone answers a question, in the soft creak of a door, in a photograph that makes your chest ache for a second too long. It's the kind of weight that shapes you without permission. The war came home with him, and the questions I never asked, they came home with me. Even now, decades later, I can feel it. Not like a wound exactly, more like a shadow that moves just behind me, reminding me that some stories are never fully finished, and sometimes they wait for you to notice them. Some words, some truths wait too long, and they become part of who you are. And that's the thing about homecomings. Sometimes the person who returns isn't the one you're expecting. And sometimes the child who waits isn't the same either. The war had ended years ago, but its echo stayed. And so did we, learning, surviving, and carrying it forward. But the questions, they linger. Maybe they always will. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more real, heart-touching stories from lives that changed forever.